All right, good morning AP class. This is our first mini lecture video. What I'm going to try and do with these is focus on the points that may cause confusion. I'm going to have to trust you to learn the basics of the chapter, and I'm just going to be picking out the stuff that I think you might struggle with and adding to it with lectures. So this first one, dealing with the 1920s, is about bubbles and speculation. These are some of the key factors in why the Great Depression happens the way it does. All right, so in a free market, the basis of this is anybody can buy pretty much what they want, unless it's, heavy military equipment or industrial poison. And because of this, people tend to look for things that are going to increase in value. That's the whole theory behind stock investing. I know several of you are into that. When we run into a problem, is often when those become either real-world goods that are necessary for people's survival. Think about toilet paper right now. Or when you run into a situation where a lot of people choose to speculate on the same product at once, supply and demand drives up the price, and the price vastly outstrips the actual value of the thing. So today we're going to talk about three bubbles that affect the Roaring '20s and the Great Depression. And we're going to talk about how those worked. All right, excellent. So the first bubble is actually not a result of speculation. The first bubble is a result of the First World War. Armies were needed to be fed. Food had to be imported to Europe because places in Europe were being, blown up and poison gassed. And so the U.S. and Canada were overproducing wheat, overproducing beef, overproducing pork, anything like that, to put it on ships, send it to Europe, and replace the farm production of mostly central France. And then later reconstructing Germany. This meant that the price of grains rose. Because of the high demand, farmers were getting a lot, they were producing more. This created a short-term bubble in the price of food. War ends, Germany gets onto a reasonably stable food plane. France gets back to producing food in some of the battle areas, some of them still don't, 100 years on. And what we have is then suddenly all these farmers have bought land, bought equipment, produced more grain, and they don't need to produce as much. They've extended themselves on loans to do this, and their income drops, and that causes a serious problem for a lot of particularly Western farmers. This is that bubble in farm prices. Okay. That bursts in the early 20s. Nobody really notices because the rest of the economy is going so well, but man, farmers do. And that is a problem for them throughout the 20s. Second one I want to talk about is land speculation. This is something that's cropped up a number of times in American history. You saw it in 2008 with the price of homes. You're seeing it in Lincoln right now. People are buying properties not necessarily to use them, but to hold on to them because they think the value is going to go up. There's nothing wrong with that per se, but when too many people do that, eventually the properties are consumed and demand starts to drop because the costs are very high and people are stuck holding these properties that they probably borrowed money to buy, and the value falls. That's a classic real estate bubble. 2008, late 1980s, you see this over and over in American history. Well, the same thing was happening in the late 20s. People were buying land with the idea that the growth was going to keep continuing and people would always be there to buy it. And when the stock market crashes in 28, when the Great Depression sets in, they're stuck holding the bag on a lot of borrowed money and a lot of land that nobody wants, especially with the farm bubble also happening during that era. And then finally, we have stock speculation. Same exact idea. Now, people normally invest in stock, fine. Speculation is a little bit different. When we talk about stock speculation, we're talking about the short-term investor. I'm going to borrow $100,000. I'm going to buy $100,000 worth of GE. And 2 weeks from now, I'm going to sell that after it's gone up 50 cents a share or something, pay back the loan, and I get to keep the interest. It's the profit. It sounds like a great idea. The problem is it will only work for so long because eventually stocks stop going up, they go down for a little while. Now, if you've invested your own money, that just means you have to be patient. This is why, by the way, you never invest money you need tomorrow. Simple as that. If you've invested your own money, you be patient, the stock market will come back. If you have a short-term loan from a bank and you've invested that, then you're in the position of having to sell off your stocks really quickly so you can recover as much of the principal as possible and pay the bank back. What happens when all kinds of people do that is that if I'm selling and he's selling and you're selling, the price of the stock is going to drop. That makes it even worse. Then what happens is people who have invested their own money start to think the world is ending and panic sell, which again, by the way, going on right now, and that further drives the price down. Nowadays, we have something called a circuit breaker built into the system where if it drops a certain amount over a certain time, trading on stocks stops for a period. There was no such circuit breaker back then. So what happens at the end of the 20s is we have a situation that is touched off by speculation where we have a massive collapse and the price of stocks just plummets. This period was known for stockbrokers jumping out of buildings, killing themselves because they had lost millions and owed millions to the banks. It's also what happens when any of these bubbles burst is not only do the people who owe the banks money get hurt, but they default on their loans and the banks get hurt. Okay, nobody really sympathizes that much with a bank, but the problem when a bank gets hurt is when a bank goes under, at least in this time period, everybody who's put money in that bank loses that money. That's precisely what happened at the end of the 1920s, is you had banks failing and the people who had invested in those banks, literally people who had savings accounts or checking accounts, suddenly had lost everything. One of the things that prevents that today is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, but that is a New Deal development that is a direct result of this. So I wanted to talk about this one element because people do get confused about speculation and bubbles, and that's really all they are. They're a simple concept, but it's one of those things that people tend to struggle with. So if you've got questions, email me, text me, call me, do whatever you got to do. I'm around 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. I'll be responding. I may not do it immediately, but I will respond to you. And keep working on those projects. Make sure you've got the 20s and 30s done, that you've got the New Deal done. We're going to be doing the New Deal fairly quickly and running into World War II very shortly. The other thing to keep in mind is this is unofficial now, but it looks like the AP tests will be happening on the 8th, but happening at home. I have no idea how they're going to make that work, but I will fill you in as soon as I know. All right, thank you very much.